Welcome, everybody. Wow, we have in the living flesh Kathy Powell, who up here looks fabulous, just as fabulous. She's going to give a talk called Managing Priorities, and this is hot. We have some handouts afterwards, but so you don't need to scribble a whole bunch of notes. I think she'll probably give you her own credentials, but I just wanted to say a few words from her website. So her official title is Certified Professional Coach and Productivity Consultant. I also like the other word, Life Architect, creating blueprints for purposeful and productive lives. Ooh, I like that. So here's a direct quote, and I just think this is like, if you ever want an elevator speech and you want to tell someone what you do and you have like 30 seconds to do it before the door closes, okay, this is it. Quote, my greatest joy is to empower and equip others to live the life of freedom and fulfillment they desire, to give them the internal and external tools to organize their entire life so their environment and lifestyle reflect their values and passions. Wow, it's a mouthful. But really, there's a lot of what she does. She's been doing it for many years. And I hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation. Kathy Powell.
Thank you, Susan. This is one of my favorite topics, managing priorities, because all of us have times in our lives where we feel completely overwhelmed, and that overwhelm can be pretty disabling when it happens. And so I have some tools that I'm going to share this evening that will help you manage so that you can overcome the overwhelm in your life and focus on what's most important. So, does anybody relate to this?
Yeah.
Okay. So, overwhelm, oftentimes, I like to think of sticky notes on the brain. And we have a lot of them. And we just keep adding more sticky notes to the brain. And at some point, this is what happens. You're just like, I can't take it anymore. So, I have found the ripple effect is a really cool thing. You know how when you throw a rock into a pond and it creates that ripple? Well, that ripple can be overwhelm or it can be calm and peace. So you get to decide what you want that ripple to be. And we get what we consistently focus on. So the question is, are you focused on what you want or are you focused on what you don't want? Because whatever you focus on, you're going to attract more of into your life. So I have an exercise that will be in your handout. This web address is in the handout, so you don't need to write it down. It's called a RAM dump. RAM in a computer is, let's see, random active memory, I think is what that stands for. And when the RAM gets full in a computer, the computer slows down. And when the RAM gets full in our brains, same thing happens. Our brains slow down. It's just harder for us to be as productive. So this exercise, this RAM dump, has kind of an exhaustive list of questions that help you to take all those sticky notes off your brain and dump them onto paper, and then it gives you something to do with all the things that you've written down so that you can actually manage that. So it can feel overwhelming to do it, but after you've done it, it's pretty cool. So I encourage you to consider doing that. And I love this quote from Napoleon Hill. He once said, "Those who program themselves for success find a way to succeed even in the midst of the most difficult of circumstances. Solutions to most problems come from one source and one source alone, yourself." And that's so true. We have the answers within ourselves, and we just have to source those. So I like, when we talk about what matters most in our lives, I like to talk about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, because efficiency is about doing more things faster. And back in the 70s, I think that was kind of, people would hire efficiency experts to come in and help them do more things faster. And there's nothing wrong with doing more things faster, but even better than that is effectiveness. And effectiveness is about doing the right things. So I love this quote from Stephen Covey. Covey has written two books, he's written more than two books, but two books that I love, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. How many of you have read that book? Okay, great. And the third of the 7 habits that he wrote about is putting first things first in your life. So he wrote another book called First Things First. And some of the resources that I'm going to be sharing with you this evening are from his book. So he says, what does it matter how much we do if what we're doing isn't what matters most? It's kind of a tongue twister, but it's packed with a lot of meaning. And I think what matters most is really at the core of managing priorities. So this is the first of the tools that I'm going to share with you from Covey's books. It's the time management matrix. And how many of you are familiar with this matrix? Okay, great. This matrix has really helped me to manage my time better because it breaks time into 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1 is known as the quadrant of necessity because it's necessary that we focus on things that are both important and urgent. Urgent means that it's either time sensitive or deadline driven. So things can be important and urgent, and those things really need to be managed in our lives. So quadrant 2 is known as the quadrant of quality and personal leadership. And this is the quadrant that is the easiest to put on the back burner because it's important to you. The activities in this quadrant are important to you, but because they're not urgent, there's no deadline by which you must do these things, it's really easy to just put it on the back burner. And a really good example of this is the exercise. There's no deadline by which we must exercise, right? I mean, unless you go to your healthcare provider who says, you know, if you don't start exercising more, you're headed straight for a heart attack. Now what happens to quadrant 2? Who can tell me? It becomes quadrant 1. It's now urgent that you deal with this. So you can focus on quadrant 2 when it's not urgent, or you can manage it when it's in quadrant 1. It's up to you. So this is a really important quadrant to pay attention to, and it's the one that kind of gets the shaft. Quadrant 3 is known as the quadrant of deception because we get deceived into believing that the things in this quadrant are important when in fact they are not important. But because they're urgent, and we are an urgency-addicted society, we tend to focus on that which is urgent, whether it's important or not. So this is a great opportunity to identify the things that are not important to you and say no to them. You want to avoid things in quadrants 3 and 4 which are not important to you. So I want to talk about one exception to that. If you have a relationship with someone who's really important to you, and there's an activity associated with that relationship, you may choose, and that's the operative word, choose, to make the activity important because of the relationship. I'll give you an example. Our daughter's almost 33 now, but when she was really little, every night she wanted Goodnight Moon read to her before bed. And you're laughing because probably a lot of you have read Goodnight Moon many times. I got kind of tired of it. And so personally, reading Goodnight Moon was not important to me. But my relationship with my daughter was very important to me, and because that book was important to her, I chose to make that a quadrant 1 activity. Bedtime is urgent because it's deadline driven. It's time sensitive, you know. It's not like I'm going to say, well, let's read Goodnight Moon at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I chose to make that a quadrant 1 activity. Another example of that might be if you work for someone else and you're required to submit a month-end report that you think is really dumb, but it's a requirement of your job. If you value your relationship with your supervisor or your employer, you might choose to make that activity, writing the report, important to you, not because you think the activity is important, but because you value the relationship. So this is a little bit tricky, but I want you to really think about sometimes things don't fit neatly into these 4 categories. And this is the one quadrant that if the more time you take away from quadrant 3, the more time you have to invest in quadrant 2. If you say, I don't have time for all these important but not urgent things, well, you will if you let go of these things. So that's a pretty cool thing. Quadrant 4 is known as the quadrant of waste because it's considered wasteful to spend time doing things that are neither important or urgent. And most of us don't have that much time to waste, but there's one activity in this quadrant that I'm going to guess most of us do at least occasionally, and that's called escape activities. An escape activity is when you're so stressed out, you have so many sticky notes on your brain, you're just so completely overwhelmed that you just do something to escape reality. And that's considered wasteful because it's not really bettering the situation. Now, you could take the same exact activity, and that if it's considered true recreation and relaxation, which is quadrant 2, then that is a quadrant 2 activity. But if you're doing it to escape reality, it's considered wasteful. So it's, again, it's not the activity necessarily, but the motivation behind that activity that helps you to determine which of these 4 quadrants you're in. In the handout that I'm giving you tonight, I have the time management matrix that's filled out, and I have another page that's blank so that you can take that and fill it in with your activities. So I invite you to do that. I want to talk about the Pareto principle, which is also known as the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is with anything, whether it be time, resources, space, or the effort that you put into things, it's uncanny how accurate this Pareto principle is. A few things, 20%, are vital, and many, 80%, are trivial. So if you look at this example here, if you, let's say that 20% of the activities that you do will yield 80% of the results that you desire. 80% of the activities you do will yield 20% of the results that you desire. So if you can figure out what that 20% is, you're going to be far ahead of putting first things first in your life and being more productive. So I don't know what happened. I had these set up so they would go one at a time, but it's not clicking that way, so you get to see them all at once. Here are a few examples. 80% of the clothes in your closet are worn 20% of the time. Would you agree with that, pretty much?
Yes.
I do. It applies to me. And 20% of the clothes in your closet are worn 80% of the time. So if your closet is overstuffed, it might be a good idea to figure out what that 80% is and get rid of at least some of it so that you can see the 20% that you really like. 80% of your measurable results will come from 20% of the items on your to-do list. And 20% of a company's employees will yield 80% of the desired results. So if you work for someone else, you want to be sure you're in that 20%. So the bottom line here is that consistent application of this principle will help you to be dramatically more productive. And so you want to take action on that 20%. And 20% of an 8-hour workday is only 96 minutes. So if you work a 40-hour work week, 96 minutes a day is 20%. So we're going to talk about planning this evening, and when you're doing your planning, if you can identify what are those 20%, what's the 96 minutes a day that even if I waste the rest of the day, I'm not suggesting you do that, but if you waste the rest of the day, if I can handle this 96 minutes a day, I'm going to be far ahead. If you know what that is, that's going to really help you to be more productive. So we're going to talk about putting first things first in by doing some planning. And there are typically some stumbling blocks that people experience with putting first things first. And so I'm inviting you to look at these 3 and identify which of these 3 is the greatest stumbling block for you. The first one is just being clear about what your goals are. What are your priorities and your goals? and your intentions. If you're not clear about that, the other two don't really matter. If you're clear about that, but you struggle with organizing your time around those priorities, then perhaps that's the issue. So planning and scheduling is the second one. Or maybe you're really clear about your goals and you've got it planned out for the week, but you're not executing. You're not holding yourself accountable for doing what you say you're going to do. So I invite you to identify which of these three is the greatest stumbling block for you so that you can work on improving that. So most people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. And Covey says the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. So I'm going to share with you his 6-step weekly planning process. And this is the process. You begin by connecting with your mission. Only 1% of the population of individuals has a mission statement. Most companies do, but individuals tend not to. This is kind of the foundation for you to launch the rest from. Review your key roles. I'm going to go into all of these in greater detail, so this is just a quick review. Identify your weekly goals or intentions in writing. Calendar those in. Exercise integrity. You're living the week that you've scheduled for yourself. Exercise integrity in the moment of choice. And then at the end of that week, evaluate and learn, and you start the week over. So let's begin with step one. And someone once said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And that's pretty much true. So you want to be clear about what's most important to you. And to do that, the suggestion is that you have a mission statement. And in the class, in the handout, I have this website also, the Franklin Covey Mission Statement Builder. If you've never done any work around this and you want to spend a little bit of time, this is a free tool that you can access online. And it's okay. I spent 3 days in a workshop peeling the onion to come up with my 1-sentence mission statement. So this isn't necessarily the end result, but it will help you get started. So there are several things that wrap into your mission. First of all, your values, what's most important to you. Your vision, who do you want to be? Your purpose, what gives your life meaning? And then you wrap all of that in together, your values, vision, and purpose, and what do you want to do with your life to honor those. So this is the purpose statement that I wrote that took me 3 days. I am a divine messenger of peace, compassionately infusing balance and harmony. For me, peace, balance, and harmony are really core values. So that became a part of that statement. I wrote this in 1999 and it hasn't changed. What I do has changed, but who I'm being has not. So this is, instead of reading a mission statement, I read my purpose statement, or I have it memorized, I don't have to read it. I remind myself of my purpose before I do my weekly planning. So when your values drive your vision, you are on purpose. Step 2 of the weekly planning process is to review your roles. And most people have never really stopped to think about what their roles are. So I encourage you to identify your roles and then on a weekly basis to review those as part of your planning. You always start with self. And self has 4 parts to it: physical, mental, spiritual, and social. Identify a maximum of 7 key roles. You don't have to have 7, but no more than 7. And you can have sub-roles for a business role or a major role in your life. So this is mine, and you can see I've started with self at the top: physical, mental, spiritual, social. And then I am a wife, a mother. Family member incorporates all the other family relationships that wife and mother needed their own, but the rest are, it's kind of a catch-all for me. Business owner, friend, community volunteer, and singer. I was a music major in college. Singing is an important part of my life. And even though that's not something that I've chosen to do professionally, it's an important enough part that I want that to be on there. So you can see that the business owner role, I've got some sub-roles that I've identified for that. So when I do my weekly planning, I go through all of this to help me identify my choices for the week. So step 3 is to identify those in writing. And Covey calls it goals. I call it choices. The reason why I prefer the word choices, weekly choices, is because for me personally, goals sometimes represent shoulds and have-tos. And language is extremely powerful. So if you're saying, I should, I gotta, I have to, that's victim language. I'm not interested in what you should do. I'm interested in what you choose to do based on your values and priorities. And so I have 3 words there: goals, intentions, or choices. You can pick whatever speaks to you. But the purpose of step 3 is to identify those in writing for every one of your goals. And you can see an example here. And notice how specific I am. I'm not saying exercise more, drink more water. I'm being as specific as possible. If you go with goals, goals are what? Specific and measurable, right? So you want to be as specific and measurable as you can in the choices that you make or the goals that you set for yourself. So a few things about setting goals. You want to identify 2 or 3 important results that you want to achieve in each of the roles. And remember that your values combined with your goals will help you to identify what those goals, choices, or intentions are. You want to focus on the important rather than just on the urgent. You want to identify a goal, but if you want to get more traction, you can identify a minimum, a target, and an outrageous goal. That's just for something if you want to kind of push yourself. That's not something I typically do every week, but if I'm wanting to push myself, I'll do that. Goals can be focus areas. And a good example of that is I choose to be a better reflective listener with my spouse this week. So that one isn't measurable necessarily, but that may be something that I put down under my role as wife, better reflective listener. And if you want to carry that further, you might say, I'm specifically going to focus on doing that while we're having dinner. That helps anchor that to an activity. And so goals can be focus areas or activities. And again, you want to be as specific as possible, specific and measurable with your activities. Remember that every time you say yes to someone or something, you are in fact saying no to someone or something else. So as you're going through this process, just remember that. And again, be really aware of the victim language. I choose to, not I should, I gotta, I have to. Step 4 is to schedule your intentions into your calendar, and or your goals or your choices, whatever you want to call it. And so you want to schedule when you're going to take the action, and you always want white space in your calendar. If you have your calendar completely filled in, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because we all know that things are going to happen in the coming week that we can't plan on. Just, that's the way life is. So you want to have some wiggle room, some white space in your calendar for that. And if something comes up that you need to reschedule, I encourage you, if you're doing a paper calendar, I encourage you to use a pencil so that if you need to erase something and move it, it's easier to do. If you use pen, you're going to have a pretty messy calendar. And if you use an electronic calendar, many people have calendars on their phones these days. That's where mine is. And I do my weekly planning on my computer, and it syncs with my phone. And the reason for that is that you really want a weekly view when you're doing your weekly planning. If you can only see one day at a time, it's just harder to do. So I encourage you to If you have a paper calendar, use a weekly planner, not a daily planner or a monthly planner. And if you're using an electronic calendar, use your computer for the actual planning session. Step 5 is to exercise integrity in the moment of choice. It means you've planned your week and now you're living it. And things are going to come up that you can't anticipate, and you get to decide, am I going to do what I scheduled, or am I going to do this other thing that's just come up? And Covey says, quality of life depends on what happens in the space between stimulus and response. So thinking about what is my response going to be, it comes back to honoring those priorities, your own values, and all of that. So if something more important comes up, as much as possible, reschedule what you already had in there, because when you did your planning, that was important. Sometimes that's not possible, but if you can, that helps you to honor that integrity. And decisions are based on your priorities, not someone else's. Again, going back to what I said about quadrant 3, occasionally, because you value a relationship, you may choose to make someone else's priority higher than yours in a particular situation. The operative word there is that it's a choice. It's not a should, gotta, have to. And you really want to stay away from that victim language that can catch you up pretty quickly. And step 6, the last step. I actually moved this to step 3 in my weekly planning. I review my mission, I review my roles, and then I review the previous week before planning the coming week. But in the book, it doesn't make any sense to put it there, so you have to go through it once in order to have something to evaluate. So step 6 in the book is to evaluate and learn. And if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. And some people say one definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and
expecting a different outcome.
Right. So we can look at the previous week and say what worked, what didn't work. Based on that, what did I learn from that, and what do I choose to do differently in the coming week? So a few tips about weekly planning. Schedule an hour a week to do this, and as much as possible, schedule it at the same time. Some people like to do this Sunday afternoon or evening for the coming week. I like to do mine Friday afternoon. Fridays are usually quieter than many other times, and I like to do my planning on Friday, and I start it for the following Monday through Sunday, because I don't like to plan like this Friday for this Saturday and Sunday. I've already got that planned, so that's how I do it. But however it works for you, pick a time of the week and actually put it on your calendar as an appointment with yourself, and keep that as sacred as possible. When you're planning, I encourage you to have some 3x5 cards. I know this is bigger than 3x5, but that's what I have. Have some 3x5 cards, because there will be many sticky notes that are falling off of your brain. And you're going to be saying, oh, that'll just take a second, I'll just do it now. What do you think will happen if you do that? If you just take that second? You ever going to get back to the planning? Yeah. So take the sticky notes, or put them on one sticky note per 3x5 card. Not a list of them, but one per card. And then at the end of your planning session, this is an accordion tickler file. Okay. It's 31 in January through December. And so you can say, I'm going to do this in 3 months, and put it behind the tab for that month. Or I'm going to do this on Monday. And what is Monday? I always have a calendar on mine, so
The
you can see. The 15th. So I put it behind the tab for the 15th, and I don't give it another thought till the 15th. This is a great tool. If you prefer electronic, you can put reminders on your calendar instead of in a tickler file. But I like the tickler file because so often I have something that came in the mail that I want to deal with, or something physical, and I don't want to start a pile of paper of things I got to do. So the tickler file really helps with that. Do your planning in an inspiring place where you're not going to be interrupted. Turn your phone off, turn the dinger on your computer off when the emails come in. Whatever sounds are going to distract you, you want to get rid of those. And don't cut corners. If you don't follow all 6 steps, it's just not the same process. So I really encourage you to do all 6 steps each week. These are my roles here. I mentioned them earlier, but I actually have them in the order that I review them. And it's okay to say, I choose not to do something with a particular role this week. There's a big difference between choosing not to do something and not getting around to it. And if I didn't have singer, for example, on the list, that could fall off the radar pretty easily. Every week I ask myself, is there anything I choose to do with that part of my life? And some weeks I say yes, and some weeks I say no. And there's nothing wrong with either one. It's the opportunity for choice that's important, because I've said that all of these are important roles in my life. So we're just wrapping up here, and I want to share a couple of resources. And again, these will be in your class or your handout. I teach a webinar called Buried in Paper. I've taught this since 2003, and you learn about the tickler file in it. You learn how to make decisions quickly, and some great tools for follow-up. So if that's something that appeals to you, I invite you to register for my free webinar. And I also have another one called Find Anything in 5 Seconds or Less. And I've been using a system since 1996. I still use the same system. And my husband and I can both find anything that we file or store in our home in 5 seconds or less. It really works. So if you want to find out more about that, there's another free webinar that you can participate in to learn more. So I want to open it up for some discussion. Any questions, comments, insights that you have?
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. So someone, and it sounds like you're very disciplined, and you've done a lot of thought in how this applies to your life. I'm curious how you transition from a typical week to vacation, or when things are really different and maybe this seems almost too much and you want to be more free spirit, and then what happens trying to go back. I mean, that kind of dynamics seems interesting to me.
Well, I think different people vacation in different ways. My daughter and her husband are just getting back from Maui today, and he wanted to plan every minute of the week in Maui, and she was like, let's just go and see what we feel like. So the planning for vacation, I think, is really a personal preference thing. And there may be certain things that I'm going to talk about: exercise and diet. When you're on vacation, it's a great opportunity to really blow that. So to have some intention about that, and that doesn't mean you have to be completely rigid, but to have some intentionality going into it, I think, is important. So it may be that when you do your planning for a vacation week, it's as simple as saying, I have a few intentions while I'm on vacation. I really want to connect with my spouse. I want to be healthy. I want to have fun. I want to relax, and I want to read. You know, it could be that simple. And if you want to read on your vacation and you didn't bring your reading materials, then it makes it harder to do. You have to go out and buy something. So having some planning, even with vacation, just light planning is good. And then when you come back, you have your more typical week, and you're back to that. Does that help?
Yeah.
I think intention is really important, whether we're on vacation or we're working or we're doing something else. Being on purpose is really good. There were some other, yes?
Could you just speak a little bit, all of this sounds amazing and wonderful, but coming from a place of being very like OCD, I have a problem not listening to Like I know like, oh, I should get going, or oh, I should stop doing this activity right now, and but then not following through with that and continuing like whatever activity I'm on, which then gets me into trouble. So could you just speak on some advice for when we're first starting off on some of these things?
So what I would invite you to do is to look at what's behind the should and what are the choices within that. Because there are, you know, I'm the same way with my diet. It's like, oh, I shouldn't eat that. And when I catch myself shoulding on myself, I say, what do I choose? I'm committed to good health. You could do that with anything. You know, really, I should move on to the next activity. Stop yourself and ask, what do I choose? Am I committed to this next activity? It just, being at choice, it takes you out of that victim place. And I'm really defiant when somebody tells me what I have to do. I'm like the 2-year-old, I don't have to do anything, you know? I mean, even when I'm telling me, I just don't want somebody telling me what I have to do. So I really respond better to choices, and I think most people do. And so looking at the absolutes in your life, and you may find that some of those absolutes are in place for a reason and they're beneficial to you, taking that one step further and asking, where's the choice in that? This is something I choose to honor. Happens with exercise for me too. I schedule an exercise time and the time comes and I go, I don't feel like it. What am I committed to? I'm committed to good health. My dad died when he was 47, he had a heart attack. My brother died a year ago, age 57, of a heart attack. You know, I have the genes, and I know that exercise and diet and that sort of thing is really important. And so if I don't feel like it, I can examine that a little bit and say, what am I committed to? That really helps.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't have all the answers either, so some of you may have insights to share about what we've been talking about. I know some of you are familiar with the time management matrix and some of Covey's work. So what other?
I just really appreciated the reminder that you get more of what you focus on, because it seems like at different times in my life, there are things that really aren't urgent and maybe not even priorities to me, but they're out there grabbing my attention.
Yeah.
And so it's that reminder at a friend who's a skydiver who basically said the same thing, that and she has a story about jumping out of the airplane, beautiful clear field, and all of a sudden she notices this tiny little patch of blackberry bushes and bramble bushes. And she's like, and as much as I tried to focus on the other stuff, she's like, and the more she focused on it, the closer she got to it. It's like, you know, I had an entire green field to land on and I ended up in bramble bushes because I just couldn't take my focus off.
No, it's so true. It's so true. If you're driving down the road and you look off to the right, what happens to the car? It kind of goes off to the right typically. So it's what we focus on expands. What we focus on, we get more of. It's so important to be very conscious of what we're focused on. And if you're focused on what you don't want, that bramble bush, you may very well land it. So, yeah, very important point. Thank you for mentioning that.
You know, I'm finding that a lot of what I call time-wasting activities, like being on hold or calling insurance companies 20 times to get one answer or whatever. I mean, they're kind of have-tos, but they're a time waster. And so to me, they're kind of like low-hanging fruit, or they should be low-hanging fruit, but it takes up too much time. So what I'm maybe, this is off course, but what happens at the end of 5 hours, I get 3 tasks. And I'm just almost enraged because I've wasted my time on activities that I just want Comcast to fix the modem. That's all.
Well, or those phone things where you press 1 for this, press 2, you know.
Or
And then you end up back at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Or entering in 20 different
Yeah.
passwords
Yeah.
and resetting your
Yeah.
password and
Yeah.
then,
No,
you know,
it's maddening.
It's just,
It's the world we live in, and
I
it's
know,
absolutely
and-
maddening. And I love the companies that are now saying, if you prefer for us to call you back when it's your turn. Have you gotten any of those?
Yes.
I love that.
yeah.
And please turn the music off, you know, or the commercials. I can't concentrate. I'm very, whatever I'm hearing, I'm, you know, I'm a musician, so sounds are important to me. And it's really hard to focus, and so I like it when a company either has silence for the whole time, and I can put it on speakerphone and set it down and go do my work, or they say, I'll call you back when it's your turn, and they do.
So in that
That's not always the case.
one, I don't know which quadrant I'd even put these in. I mean, they're important things, but they end up being time wasters.
Right.
So I guess my question, how do I not be enraged by the end of it? What kind of tools should I have in my toolbox for that?
And actually,
When
I just
I'm not-
finished writing a blog today that is about mindfulness,
Uh-huh.
and that will be in May. I will have that on my website. But it's your attitude is you're the only one that can choose, and you are choosing how you feel. People can say awful things to you, and it's not what they say that makes you feel bad, it's what you say to yourself about what they said that makes you feel bad. Nobody, Eleanor Roosevelt said, nobody can, what was that quote? I'm butchering it. Nobody can make you feel bad about your permission.
Nobody make you feel inferior without
Yeah.
permission or something.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, people oftentimes will blame other people and say, you made me feel angry. No, the reality is you filtered whatever they said or did. Somebody cut you off in traffic. And, you know, and you could say to yourself, well, maybe they have something more important to get to than I do. Or you could say, rude, you know. So it's what you say to yourself, and it's easier said than done. And there are certain companies that can push our buttons. You mentioned Comcast. I've heard stories about people's experiences with that company, and it does come back to your own mindfulness and making choices about how you allow an experience to make you feel. I write a lot in my blogs about an equation that I love. It's E plus R equals O. E, this comes from Jack Canfield, who's my mentor. And Jack taught me this equation many years ago, and it changed my life. E is an event in your life. R is your response to that event, and O is the outcome. So the event is you need to call Comcast to get your modem fixed, and you're on a round. Press this, press this, press this, and then you're on hold, and then you get cut off, and you have to start over, and so that's the event. Your response to that event will determine the outcome for you, and you're the only one who can do that.
Yeah, I understand. I guess what I feel sometimes is that whether it be quadrant 1 or quadrant 3 or whatever, then that keeps me from doing what I've planned for quadrant 2.
Well,
So
and that
that's
would be-
just my whine.
Yeah, that would be a case where you could say, that's happened with me on my computer, something's not working and I really need my computer for my work. And so that's exercising integrity in the moment of choice and saying, okay, I plan to exercise during this time, and instead I choose to make this phone call because this is a time-sensitive thing and I choose to do that. But the integrity piece is rescheduling the exercise for another time because that's still important to me.
Well, I think another way of thinking about it along those lines, use your example or a similar one, is when you know it's going to happen. I mean, no one calls Comcast
Right.
and gets everything they want done in 3 minutes.
Right.
Ever. I mean, does anyone know? So you know before you make the phone call, okay, this can go a number of ways. How am I going to deal with it, right? And then let's say you haven't pre-thought that, you go through all this, and now we're talking about this as the post-event. So the next time you can decide how you're going to feel about it. I mean, it's like the choice.
It's the evaluate
right?
and learn piece.
Right, exactly.
It's like,
It's a
okay,
choice.
what did I learn from that? What am I going to do?
Another great example, similar in computers, is I'm sitting down, I have like this window of time, 45 minutes, I'm going to get something done because it's getting close to bedtime and I have my charge to do, right? And suddenly my computer wants to update, and it's a big one, and it's iOS whatever, and 45 minutes later, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I've lost all that time. So, and this happened recently, and I realized my blood pressure was probably going up, and I was thinking like, crap. But I thought, no. I knew this was probably going to happen because that's what happens when you do updates. So I thought, this is not going to be a big thing. And previously, it would have just been rotten, and I would have gotten this. But I kind of decided my choice was, I will just go over here. It's going to do what it's going to do, and I'll do this other thing instead that I really enjoy that I wasn't planning on doing. So it sounds almost artificial to plan it and talk about it that way, but it becomes a better response, I think, and it becomes friendlier to yourself, too.
Right.
So.
And that E plus R equals O, the R can either be a reaction, which is knee-jerk, what I've always done, or it can be a response. And a response has some thought behind it. So before you call Comcast, you put some thought into, okay, how can I make this be the best experience for me? Are there busy work things that I can do while I'm on hold that require a huge amount of brain cells? Or is there something fun I can do? Or sometimes I will do that I have a treadmill, and I'll get on the treadmill. And it's like, hey, take as long as you want to put me on. Get my exercise done. So it comes back to making choices that are going to help you to have a better outcome. And you're the only one that can do that. All right. Other questions, comments, thoughts, insights? All right, well, I'm going to just wrap up here with an offer. So there are some ways that I can help if you have interest. I can help you to get organized and increase your productivity and enjoy greater fulfillment and balance in your life. If you want help navigating something big in your life, starting or growing a business, improving your health and relationships, support and encouragement with a big goal or something else, I invite you to schedule a 30-minute, no-cost discovery call with me. That's a phone conversation. And when you go to this link, which is in your handout, you'll have access to my calendar and you can reserve a time. So thank you very much for your time and attention this evening. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being here.
Figure out a time this week where you can sit down and spend an hour with yourself and think about all this. I love it. Thank you so much. It was great. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.